Okay, next up I'd like to welcome Mandy Kelly from the Insurance Institute of Ireland. Mandy is an education development specialist with over 13 years experience in the education field. She holds a BA honours in economics, politics and law, and in 2019 she joined the Insurance Institute and works as an education development specialist. And the title of Mandy's presentation is Amplifying the Student Voice Through Equity, Diversity and Educational Innovation. Over to you, Mandy.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mandy and I work as an education development specialist at the Insurance Institute of Ireland. First, I would like to thank the staff of HEA Sligo for giving me the opportunity to speak at this UDL Education Conference. I would also like to thank Orla and Patricia for their warm welcome yesterday when I visited the campus. From my years as an education development specialist, my years of teaching experience in the United Arab Emirates, and as a former DCU undergrad access student, I would hope that through showcasing the student success page that I developed, that I may be considered as an advocate for the inclusive student experience and having a passion for promoting continuous lifelong learning. As the title of my presentation states, I strongly believe that we all here have a role to play in amplifying the student voice and driving student success. UDL is an important part of the 2022 to 2024 strategic plan at the Insurance Institute. The Insurance Institute of Ireland is a professional education body which delivers education programmes to people working in the insurance industry. We currently have 15,200 members across 5 local institutes. The education team, which I work with, oversees the design and development of the Institute's programmes, textbooks, learning supports and assessments. We recognise the benefits of community for both our members and new members, and we continuously focus on the importance of having an inclusive and diverse learner platform. The team also recognises the diversified member population that we serve and the need to ensure that all our students feel included and welcome in their interactions with us. I am very proud to say that all of us at the education team believe in and strive by this quote by Katie Novak: "There are no labels in UDL, only fabulous, amazing students with different levels of variability." My own UDL journey began in June 2022 when I, alongside other members, undertook the UDL badge. I hope to also work towards gaining the UDL Facilitator badge later this year. The idea for the Student Success Portal derived through various discussion sessions with my line manager and my colleagues regarding driving student success and how we could best remove barriers to learning and overcome the challenges that some of our students were experiencing. I was able to find excellent support and research on student success through sourcing academic research on student success from the National Forum for the Enhancement of Teaching and Learning in Higher Education. Throughout the planning and implementation stages, the goal was developing a student success support to help implement an institute-wide, holistic and integrated approach to student achievement and ultimately tackle barriers to student success. The project was delivered with the goal of also intensifying early engagement with student supports and resources, specifically aimed at supporting students that had previously been unsuccessful in the accredited product advisor or certified insurance practitioner module. Again, I would like to thank my colleagues both at the Insurance Institute and at HEA Sligo for all their support and feedback in assisting me with the development of the support, which will be showcased in the next few moments. So the project plan that you can see here delineates the implementation of a system designed to enhance student achievement. The project planning and outlined commenced after the completion of my UDL badge in June 2022, and was delivered at the beginning of the new academic term in October of that year. Repeat APA and CIP students were contacted via email to help create awareness and to introduce the new support, and also as a way to offer one-on-one support to those students who may have experienced barriers to learning. By embedding core UDL principles in the design of the support, I was able to bring the initial concept of embedding essential student supports to life. From my research on student success, I also felt it important to embed the Student Success Toolbox to this success portal. Additionally, I'd like to highlight the support, which you will soon see, is also available on other course platforms that are offered by the Institute. It is my hope that by having this support available across various courses, that in the very near future, that I can collate valuable feedback to enhance and extend the development of the support. And I kindly ask you for 2 moments of your time to watch this short video, which will give you a flavour of the student supports featured in the Student Success page.
The introduction of an academic study support online platform was the focal point in promoting an overall inclusive learner experience. The support was designed to equip both new and repeat APA and CIP students with supports with the main goal of improving engagement, motivation, study skills, and time management skills. The platform also focused on a section that would help students with preparing for their exam, as well as maintaining a healthy well-being during their time with the Insurance Institute. The Welcome Back section specifically focuses on supporting repeat APA and CIP students with the aim of increasing student engagement with the learning supports available, as well as supports to promote student motivation. The section also provides students with contact information for one-on-one support from the education team. The study section helps students in developing an effective study plan with videos on improving note-taking and memory skills. The time management section enables students to become more confident and organized and learn more efficiently. Effective time management skills are particularly essential for adult learners who also have to maintain a healthy work-life balance. The Achieving a Good Start includes features to help develop a positive growth mindset. It also features the Student Success Toolbox project, which was developed as a collaborative project involving Dublin City University, Sligo Institute of Technology, Maynooth University, and Dundalk Institute of Technology. This tool includes features such as a time management calculator. The page also features an Engaging with Your Learning Supports section. This section features exam prep videos and checklists to help prepare students in the lead up to the online exam. Finally, the Wellbeing and Education section focuses on tips for improving digital and overall mental well-being, as well as a section which houses mental health supports. The project is also a work in progress with plans for future development, including supports for students with additional learning needs and students who are non-native English language speakers.
Really appreciate further feedback or suggestions, and I welcome any of you who would like to get in touch with me in the very near future. Finally, I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to listen to my presentation this afternoon.
Hi Mandy, that was really good. So you said that the students are notified about this. Is it after they fail exams? Is that the idea?
Yes.
Yeah. So will it be made available to students just all the time, or?
It will be available to students all the time. Sorry, my apologies. Thanks for the question. But yes, it will be available to students all the time in their exam area. But it was specifically created for students that were unsuccessful, and the plan was that through gaining the necessary data that them students would be contacted with information on accessing the support, and being able to reach out to us if they needed further assistance.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy. If anybody has any further questions for Mandy, I'm sure you can approach her after the session. So thank you very much to both our speakers, Jane and Mandy.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Jane Brennan from MTU in Tralee, and I'm going to talk to you about flexible, personal and individualised study guidance, which I think is a keystone for inclusion. Just to put it in context, the study guidance support service that I run in MTU in Tralee is a universal service. It's for students at all stages and from all disciplines, and they self-refer. We cover things like research skills, writing skills, study skills, self-management and so on, and digital tools. And I work in three ways. I run elective workshops, embedded workshops within students' timetable classes, and then also one-to-one, which is what I want to talk about today. So the question I'd like to answer this afternoon is this one. So when we have universally designed classes and assessments, we have online resources and we have elective workshops, so why is one-to-one still necessary? And I want to answer that question through 3 case studies of student meetings that I've held, which I hope will give you a sense of the richness and the uniqueness of the one-to-one offering. Needless to say, these are not real students, they're composites, and they're also highly, highly compressed, and they'll probably have to be even more compressed now. Something else I was going to say there. Yeah, so 3 case studies. So first of all, this is Kira. Obviously not her real name or her real photograph. And Kira came to me with an essay that she was having to repeat. She'd got a disappointing grade and she was having to repeat it and she wasn't quite sure why. The feedback that she got from her lecturer was that there was a problem with sentence structure. But when I looked at a piece of her writing, it was really clear to me straight away that there was almost no attempt to create any sort of meaning at all. It was just a big word salad with lots of difficult vocabulary thrown in. And when I fed this back to her, she laughed and she said, yeah, she had been in a hurry to submit it, but her big concern was that her writing shouldn't sound babyish, which was why she'd used all this long vocabulary. So we had a bit of a discussion about what academic writing is for and the fact that it's actually a form of communication, not just a means to judge students, and that if you want to communicate something, you have to know what it is that you're trying to communicate. And if you want to know what you're trying to communicate, you have to have spent a period thinking about it beforehand. So we talked about the importance of spending time researching, reading and thinking and creating a plan before ever setting any words on the page. And she understood this and she felt that she would be able to apply that to her next assignment, but she'd come to me hoping that she could just make a couple of tweaks and then resubmit it. But that really wasn't the case. So I had her talk to me about one of the pieces of research she'd referred to in her essay, and she gave me a very good account of the piece of research and why it was relevant to the question. And when I fed back to her that that's exactly what she needed to write in her assignment, she was quite amazed and she felt this was what she thought of as babyish. But I explained to her that was actually what she needed to do. So we came up with an idea that she'd use transcription software called Otter.ai, and that she'd work on draft paragraphs using Otter.ai, where it would transcribe a paragraph for her. She could work on that, she could tidy it up, and then paste it back into Microsoft Word, because she just felt more comfortable talking about her work rather than going straight to writing. So that was Kira. This is Liam. And Liam came to me in a state of great stress. He had a number of repeats to do, and he was looking at the new session of exams, and he was studying round the clock, but just felt he said, there's something wrong with my brain, it's just not sticking. When I asked him what kind of methods he was using for studying, as I expected, he said, reading over my notes, highlighting bits, sometimes saying bits aloud, and sometimes writing bits out. So I fed back to him that all of those methods that he was using were actually passive methods. And I introduced him to the concept of desirable difficulty. I think that's a really useful concept come up by some researchers called Bjork and Bjork. And the idea is much like in sport, you can't learn without actually challenging your brain. And I made the analogy with playing sport that the passive methods are kind of like trying to get fit while watching sport on the television. He understood that and went away, and he was going to give it a try. We also talked about how he might schedule his study more effectively, but I won't talk about that now because I see the clock ticking. Finally, this is Mu Yang. He's an international student. He's a postgraduate student of nursing in Tralee, and he was finding that moving from being quite good with his English at home in China to moving straight into postgrad study in Tralee was causing him some challenges, particularly with understanding what was going on in lectures. He was finding a lot of vocabulary was coming up that he wasn't familiar with, and he was finding himself completely lost. So we looked at the devices and the technology he was using. He was lucky enough to have an iPad and an Apple Pencil. We looked at a method where he might download his slides onto the iPad, check out the new vocabulary and the keywords, and annotate the slides in advance of the lecture with his Apple Pencil in Chinese translation. And I also showed him how he could use Speak Select or Speak Selection on the iPad so that he could actually hear the pronunciation of the words before he went into the class, and he'd recognise them when they came up. So that's really rushed, and I see the time ticking away there. But just to return to the original question, if we have all of these supports, why is one-to-one still necessary? Okay, so first of all, students from non-traditional backgrounds, like Kira, if nobody in your family has ever been to college before, even if you're not missing skills that other students have, there's a good chance that you'll believe you are. So there's kind of a level of reassurance needed there, in addition to any skills development. EAL and international students, again, how can they use the English that they have? How can they use the technology to support their academic language development? Students with disabilities, every student with a disability is unique. The student is unique in themselves. Every disability plays out in a different way, and then there's technology and learning preferences. So there's a huge complex interaction of factors there, and there's a need for guidance through the best ways to study. A lot of students face psychological barriers, and I'm sure you all experience this, that anxiety is a huge factor in students' experience. So although obviously we have student counsellors, very often there's a study approach needed as well, and there's a groove one between my office and the student counsellor's office as we refer people over and back. Students often misperceive their problems, so if they don't know what their problem is, it's very hard for them to access resources independently. And likewise, they often don't understand the nature of the task that they've been set, so they don't know exactly what it is that they're supposed to do, and therefore they're not able to access the independent supports. Guidance on digital tools. Digital tools are evolving, students' needs are evolving, and again, there's need for guidance as to what might be most helpful. And the last point I'd like to make, and I think it is important, that the one-to-one experience is actually a place where we can take that feedback, and a number of people have talked about the student voice. This is a place where students are really listened to, and we can understand the genuine challenges and the strengths that they bring to the HEI, and how we can develop in response to that.
Jane, I've got one question. Are you able to kind of feedback your learnings from your experiences with the students to the lecturers so they can improve the learning environment? Is there any dialogue between you and teaching staff?
I have a good relationship with a lot of the lecturers, and there's not a formal system for that at the moment, but informally, absolutely, and constantly, yeah.
Okay, cool. Any further questions for Jane?
Hi, thanks very much for your insight, Jane. I was just wondering, as I'm a librarian here at Yates Library, what supports, would your students need from an academic library environment to help them and to help you better support their learning?
Yeah, I mean, the librarians, I think, are very key, especially in terms, obviously, of finding materials. And I would work very closely with the librarians below in Tralee. I'd often work out at the library, in fact. I suppose the more librarians are aware of the kind of things that students are likely to be facing, and some of those challenges and barriers that they are facing, at the same time as being conscious of how the systems and all the databases work. Being ready to listen to them, I think.
I'm now delighted to welcome our keynote speaker, Dara Ryder. As many of you will know, Dara is the Chief Executive Officer of AHEAD. Just to give you a little background to Dara's career and his passion for supporting and creating inclusive environments for people with disabilities, Dara previously managed AHEAD's digital presence and developed a suite of online CPD programmes relating to inclusive practice in his role as digital media and e-learning manager there. After graduating from Queen's University in 2005, Dara joined Dunleary College of Further Education as a lecturer, where he became interested in inclusive education when working first-hand with students with disabilities in his classroom. When the opportunity arose in 2008, he joined AHEAD, where he has been working ever since on creating inclusive environments in education and employment for people with disability. As mentioned this morning, Dara has played a vital role in developing, structuring and engaging with the PAT4 National Collaborative projects, and we are all so delighted to have Dara and his team support us all in our endeavours to bring these projects to fruition. Dara has worked very closely with Lisa Padden of UCD, and the digital badges and toolkit are fundamental tools in informing the progressive work of the Charter development and the senior leadership training. So a particular thank you to Lisa in UCD. Dara's presentation today is entitled Teaching and Learning in the Real World, Universal Design as a Lens to Let Quality Consider Reality. So welcome, Dara. I'll hand it over to you now.
Thanks very much, Eileen. It's a very lofty title, isn't it? It's probably not going to live up to that, just to warn you. I'm just going to take about 30 seconds to get this laptop up, because I'm not too keen on standing behind the podium, so how do we chat there for a second? Okay, I have my laptop now very precariously placed, sitting on top of this podium here, so we're going to get cracking. So what are we going to do in this session today? Well, we're going to reflect a little bit on empowering learning experience that we've had, so I'm going to share one of mine with you. Hopefully you're going to have a chance to think about an experience that you might have felt as empowering. Strange old word, isn't it? Empowering. We don't think about that all the time. And sometimes I think it's a bit of a too lofty goal for us all every time we go into a session to be empowering the hell out of everybody, But we're going to try and think about one that was really special for us. We're going to explore a little bit the changing demographics of our higher education system and some of the emerging pressures in the system, some of which are directly related to those changing demographics, and there's maybe more environmental factors. So we're going to try and take an evidence-based approach to looking at that. So we often talk about this changing diversity, and we feel it in our colleges every day. But maybe let's have a look at the hard evidence to see what is actually happening there. And then finally, we're going to consider how we can meaningfully respond to support our students and staff within that. So as I was thinking about this from my own life, I was trying to think in advance of this empowering learning experience. Where was there an experience where I felt really empowered? What does that even mean for me? And actually, I thought about what I landed on was an experience really that sort of changed my confidence and my ability in a field that I absolutely had none in, and sort of empowered me to take whatever I'd learned and use it in all sorts of other facets of my life. And I felt that was something that was empowering and gave me sort of agency in my life that I didn't have before. And it turned out what I landed on was not actually a formal learning experience at all. This is my kitchen in Dublin A, my little two up, two down Dublin A kitchen in 2010. This is when I moved in first and we bought our house. My house, as I said, at the time it was at the bottom of the market here in Ireland, so we were very, very lucky. But at the time it was still an awful lot of money for me, and I had absolutely no money to get people in at that stage to come and help us do the job. So I was tasked with doing this, doing the DIY job. In particular, this task in question is to tile my kitchen. Now, my wife often says to me, these hands were made for typing. DIY is not in my wheelhouse. I have no natural talent in this area. Just to give you a bit of a backdrop of a story from my youth, I went to school in St. Peter's, in my primary school, should I say, in St. Peter's in Walkinstown in Dublin. It was actually a little bit of a distance from my house, and I used to go there because my aunt would look after me afterwards. Both of my parents were working at the time. So when it came time, as I came into 6th class to transition into secondary school, I really wanted to go to Green Hills College, which is the feeder school, because all my friends were going there. That was the reason. My parents at that stage wanted me to come back closer to home and to move to maybe a more salubrious college that had a better reputation in the world. But I was absolutely dead set on this. They were drawing a hard line in this, so I did what all kids do at that age, is I got strategic about it. So I had a little look around about all the schools that were close to me, and I realised that one thing that was different in the whole sort of offering that these schools had in comparison to Green Hills, none of them offered woodwork. So I became a very, very strong advocate of joinery. And I began to take library books out and do things like that to really show my parents that this was serious. Yeah. I want to be a joiner. I want to bring the magical skills of joinery to the world. So eventually they gave way, and they allowed me to go to Green Hills College. Safe to say, a shock came at the first parent-teacher meeting in around Christmas time. They came into the woodwork teacher, who's a chap by the name of Father Barney Reynolds, very, very gruff country priest. And they asked Father Reynolds, how's he doing? What's he making? Is he changing the world with these immense joinery skills? And Father Reynolds just looked at them and took a pause and he said, he's no Joseph. He's no Joseph. So that sort of gives you a sense of where I was at, and in a way, not where I'm still at, but where I was at certainly in 2010 with that. So I had zero confidence that I was going to be able to do this task. But yet, I was in a position where I had to try. And so I set about doing my research, and I landed on a website called Tommy's Trade Secrets. And this is Tommy's Trade Secrets page, all about how to tile a wall. And this is a little start of the introductory video that Tommy had about tiling the wall.
Hi, and welcome to Tommy's Trade Secrets. This short clip is all about tiling and how to do it right. So hopefully you'll find it useful. Take a look at the step-by-step guide, and if you like it, print it, keep it, and use it.
Now, first of all, when I heard that cheeky chappy accent, and I saw him, look, the guy's got builder pants, he has this cheeky chappy accent, he's giving me this lovely warm welcome. Tommy had my ultimate trust. I said, this guy knows what he's talking about. I am going to invest my time and my energy in Tommy. So I dived in, I downloaded the printable guide, and I watched the video multiple times over. And so eventually I got at it, and absolutely, much to my amazement, this is what my kitchen looked like 2 days later. I was wondering, would you give me a round of applause for that? That is absolutely gas. And I suppose what was really amazing for me, as I said, was that it took me a place of absolutely zero confidence in doing this totally unfamiliar skill. And through Tommy's sort of approach, which I'll maybe elaborate a little bit over there, I actually think Tommy is a really expert teacher. And through this approach, I actually learned a really difficult skill. But not just that, it gave me this immense confidence to try lots of other different types of things in this field. So, suddenly I was all putting up shelves everywhere, shelves that weren't needed anywhere, in fact. And it really empowered me in that sense. So yeah, I'm still also enjoying the fruits of that today. This is actually just me 2 days ago, just giving you a wave. Took that photo especially for you guys. So yeah, so I'm still still getting something out of that learning experience. What are we now, 12, 13 years later? So that was really important for me. So on that day, I was so buzzed up by this experience, so energized by it, but absolutely insisted that we go out and celebrate. Probably wasting half the money that I saved on a tiler in the first place. You can see on the right hand side a delicious martini there, which we had in the Westin Hotel. On the left hand side, that's my wife actually physically ignoring me because I'm still talking about how great a tiler I am in the question. And she was absolutely right at that stage because I was babbling. But the point is, I was super energized by this. And that's why I pick it out as an empowering learning experience. I was actually really excited by my ability to master that skill in such a quick time. And what was it about Tommy's approach that actually did this? You know, first of all, it's really important to say, Tommy is popular. I wasn't the only one who was buzzed up by Tommy. His YouTube channel for this video alone has 3.2 million views. So Tommy's helping people all over the world to learn this skill. And he gets amazing comments in the chat. There was something earlier on about video, about comments being controversial. He's getting amazing comments in the chat from people. I love this one here from Ravel, who says, "Who needs school when you got YouTube?" Smiley face. I don't think the formal education system will be quaking in its boots with that spelling of skill, Ravel. But the point is, he was buzzed up about it just like I was. You know, and Tommy had this effect on people. So what was he doing? Well, this is just some of the things that Tommy did that made, I suppose, the learning experience approachable for me. His video was accompanied by a printable guide, as he mentioned. So this guide had checklists, it had images, we could tick off our stages, we could go deep into the different stages as we moved along, and we could reference it. He begun his video with a full review of the tools needed. So he assumed no prior knowledge. He said, this is a tile cutter, this is what it's for, this is how you use it. So before we even get into showing us the actual individual stages, we know where we're at. He also gave low cost and free alternative options where he possibly could. So I remember specifically him saying, don't go and buy a really expensive tile cutter if this is going to be your only tiling project. Buy a really cheap one, but make sure you have some extra tiles because you're going to break a lot of them. So that was a really, really useful tip. And he also gave out these methods for spreading out the job. So he recognized most of the people coming to his channel weren't going to be professional tilers who could give several days to this in a row. So he gave these strategies for spreading it out over 2 weekends, which I really appreciated. He utilized the strengths of video really well. I thought a presentation about video earlier on was so good, and it's actually really kind of highlighting some of these things. Tommy used slow motion really well, just to really slow down tasks and make sure that we could copy the skill and over time master it. He used close-ups, he used replays, he used time-lapse of long processes to shorten them over time and give us a real picture of what that skill looked like in a short period of time, and he used jump cuts. And he told us also what had to be done precisely. Things like your leveling. He said leveling is really, really important. If you don't level your tiles, it's going to look pretty bad. But he said grouting, just lash that stuff up there and get it on. It'll all be fine. So he gave us a sort of sense of freedom in certain tasks, which was really, 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 really advice. So before we go any further, just going to ask you to take a little bit of time yourselves, just about 3 or 4 minutes in silence, because this is a reflective piece. I think it's hard to talk this one through because you start to get under pressure and you go, God, I need to think of an empowering learning experience, and then it gets all anxious. So have a little bit of a think. Think of an experience where the instructor met you where you were at, because I really felt that's what Tommy did for me. He met me exactly where I was at, and that made you feel empowered to learn really on your own terms. So I'd like to ask you, maybe there's a Slido code on screen here, there's a QR code, but there's also some paper on the tables with some, I think there's at least 1 or 2 copies of it on each table. So you can use a QR code to scan your camera, or you can go to slido.com and enter the code 337. Either of those 2 things will get you to the place. I'm not sure it's hidden by those damn captions. That's inclusion for you. But so here we go. Go to slido.com, enter the code 337, and we'll give you about 4 minutes to just think about that. So what I'm asking the question is to firstly have a think about that situation. That's not what I want you to enter. Once you've arrived at an experience that was really empowering from you, I want you to answer the question, what about the experience made you feel that way? So enter a really short, nice phrase, because this is going to come up as a word cloud. So I'll give you an example there, 3, 4, 5 words. One example on screen is gave me flexibility, but have a little think about that for about 4 minutes and we'll come back. Okay, was it really, really hard to think of an experience where you're empowered? Bet it was, wasn't it? No? Okay. Thanks so much for engaging with that. Really nice stuff coming in. So people think the feeling of being valued, being challenged, that's really important when we talk about universal design, because we often get thrown with the label that we're lowering the rigor if we engage in this work. It's not about lowering the rigor, it's about lowering access to the challenge. We all know from the evidence that challenge is really, really important in this work. We have things like choice, like encouragement, like skill, like capability, responsiveness, structure. I love all this because it's such, again, you see even from what people are picking out as empowering is actually very diverse in and of itself, which is really, really nice. But actually the point about all of these things is to do any of this or to make anybody feel any of those things in a learning setting, what we really need to do is have a really good understanding of who our audience are. Now, I've said Tommy completely understood his audience. Of course, he can't completely understand any audience that you're in, but you need to have a really good picture of who's in your classroom to actually go and do this stuff. So I thought it'd be really worthwhile, so maybe takes a bit of time actually asking yourselves, taking an evidence-based look at who is in our higher education classrooms today, and maybe what sort of new pressures are coming about. This is going to get very stat heavy here, which I didn't really think about that at 3:30 or 4 o'clock or wherever we are in the day. But safe to say, if you need to go back and reference all this, this is some good data for you to advocate for UD and UDL on your own campus, which you can check back on once you receive the slides. Okay, so who are our HE population? First of all, 1/3 of the HE population are aged 24 over. This is from the HEA, who have amazing data dashboards on their website. There's a smaller number of what are officially mature entrants, because mature entrants are only entered through the mature route at age 24 or over. But actually, there's much more students who are aged 24 or over in the system. So lots of them are adults, which means they bring different types of life experience into that, which means different types of demands into the role as well, into the role as a student. One really interesting one now, I would say that this is from the Euro Student Survey, which is taken with about 11,000 students in 2022. That 11% of the population who responded to that survey reported having children. That was higher than I expected when I deep dived into it. But of course, that means we know having children, depending on what age they are, but having children brings different types of caring demands into your life as well. Our students now come from all over the globe. About 12% of our HE population are international students. In particular, we have a lot of students coming from China, from India, from the United States and from Canada, from the UK, but really students coming from all over Europe, students coming from lots of parts of Africa and coming from lots of parts of South America too. So we're really seeing a huge number of international students in our population. And we're also seeing a really increased diversity in the ethnic population within our higher education institutions. So we know that 23% of them actually don't identify or don't report as being white Irish from an ethnic background. So we're seeing this increased diversity in Ireland's ethnicity more generally now being reflected in our HE populations. So that's something we have to really consider as we go forward. In terms of disability, the numbers are just jaw-dropping. Now we have of the HE Equal Access Survey, which is an annual survey taken with new entrant undergraduates. About 2/3 of the population end up taking this survey. And we know from that almost 18% self-disclose anonymously a disability within that survey. In terms of the rapid pace of this change, just back in 15-16, that was only 12%. I mean, that is an incredibly fast change in the makeup of our population, so we need to consider that. And that matches with HEAD data on the numbers of students registered with disability services. So we know from our own data, which we track on an annual basis, that numbers have risen 268% in the last 12 years alone in terms of those registrations. So that's putting a lot of increased pressure on the services, but it's also putting a lot of pressure for us to change things elsewhere in the college, which we still maybe are grappling with. We also know that 30% now enter through non-traditional entry routes. So we think about lots of our students, we tend to go towards our Leaving Cert students straight away. You could come through second level, do the Leaving Cert, come straight in. Actually, 30% of them come through some kind of different route. So that would be things like mature entry, like direct entry, like here and there would also be included in that cohort as well. And of those who do come through straight through our second level schools, we know that about 12% of those transition to higher education from a DESH skill. If you're from an international audience, DESH skills are skills of socioeconomic disadvantage, which have received extra support from the state to recognise that. So again, we're seeing a lot of a lot of different socioeconomic background students entering into our population. I would say at this point, it's really important to say this is a big win. Like this is from all the people advocating for widening participation. Well, the door is being opened, and we're seeing positive change over a long period of time in this. I would say we still have a big battle in our hands when it comes to socioeconomic disadvantage, where the numbers are still not what we want to see. We actually know that our DARE candidates, or our HEAR candidates, for example, are actually decreasing in terms of the number of applications. We also know that when it comes to DARE, which is the Disability Access Route to Education, that the students who come in through DARE tend to be from more affluent areas than the average student, which doesn't track at all in terms of the well-evidenced links between disability and poverty. So we still have a lot of work to do there. But we should also take the celebration. This is time to actually party and say we're making an impact here in this work. But I'd also like think about the pressures that's changing for us, and to think about what we're fundamentally doing about all of these new participants in higher education. So just to explore again from an evidence point of view, some of the challenges that's causing for us, or the sort of changes and the changing pressures, I suppose, that both our students have and our staff have in that context. Well, first of all, for our students, we mentioned housing at our table earlier on, and I think it was James, did you mention? I think it was from the stage. You mentioned housing as an issue. The average rents in Ireland have increased by 82% in the last 12 years. This is from the Banking Federation of Ireland, and that's compared to just an 18% rise in the EU population. So that itself is a big change in terms of financial pressure for our students. And we know from the Euro Student Survey that means that they're now spending 89% more than they were just 15 years ago on housing. So again, we're seeing, that's a new dynamic for us that we have to consider in terms of the flexibility and the access to education when we're considering how we design our programs. And we need to think about these kind of things as we put our programs together. We know now that this is causing all sorts of adverse other types of effects. Now 50% of students 54% of students now live with their parents. That's up from 45% in 2007. So again, the housing issues are causing this type of knock-on effect. And we also know that it's affecting student commutes as well. So students are now commuting a much longer distance than they used to. The census 2016 tells us that 17% of our students now travel a more than 2-hour commute round trip to our colleges. I mean, that's a big ask for us, so we have to think about that. When we're asking our students to come into college in person, we're asking them to make a 2-hour round trip. So don't be asking them to come in for 1 hour, a 1 hour lecture. We need to think about that when we're planning our programs and really respect that, the life situations of our students. It's also leading to the need to work longer hours, so those financial pressures are very real. We know that 57% of the full-time student population now work during term time, and that's up from 45% in 2007. So our students are having to work more. Working is a fundamental part for them now of actually surviving the college experience, so it's really important that we consider that. In this group, we know that they work an average of 17 hours per week. The same Euro Student Survey tells us that our students are spending roughly 37 hours per week in their college studies. So in other words, between lectures or tutorials or the actual study hours they're putting in, it's a full-time job already. And yet the average they're putting in on top of that is 17 hours per week. And that's an average. So we have some people might be doing 8, 9, 10 hours. We also know that some people might be doing 25, 26, 27 hours to make ends meet and survive. So we need to think about that as well in terms of the pressure. This is really important from an academic integrity point of view when we consider that, because the evidence is there in terms of the research between negative correlations between time spent in employment and overall grades achieved. And in particular, when we reach the kind of tipping point of around 20 hours a week, Pike tells us that that is actually a kind of a tipping point in terms of really damaging a student's grades in the long term. So it's something for us to consider. But the pressure isn't just on students there, it's also on our academic staff, and point has been well made by a number of presenters throughout today's session. I think this is really important because as access professionals, as social justice kind of professionals, sometimes we can too often lay the blame at our academic staff's door and say, it's your job to teach everyone. Yes, we know it is, but are we actually respecting that in how we put together our academic contracts and how we dedicate our hours and how we give recognition to teaching as a skill? So we know in terms of the workloads for them, 3/4 of Irish academics surveyed in 2015 for a TUI study believe that their working conditions had deteriorated. And also they're recognising this increased diversity as part of that. So they're actually saying that they believe that students are presenting with a greater variety of needs, which in turn increase the pastoral aspect of their work. But we haven't changed anything in how we're treating academics in that picture. So in all this diversity, that's something that we haven't quite grappled with. Over half of our academics did not believe that management in their institutions supported the teaching aspects of their roles. That's really important because we're asking them fundamentally to change their teaching and learning practices, but they're not getting the message from management that that's actually important and that they should dedicate time to that. And we also know that in terms of pedagogical support, there's dissatisfaction with the levels of support to do it. So instructional design support is key to all of this message that we're trying to sell. And if it's not there, our academics simply won't have the tools that they need, the knowledge that they need, the capacity that they need to do this work. from our disability support professionals, we know that a significant percentage of students, new entrant students who have a disability, do not disclose and register for support. That's when we compare HEAD data on disclosure with the Equal Access Survey data. We could probably estimate, there's slightly different methodologies in how the data is collected, but we could probably estimate around 10% of the student population are in that zone. They have a disability, but they're not registered with support. So it begs the question, when we rely heavily on those add-on supports for our students, are we actually doing the job that we need? You know, what's happening to those students in that process? And in terms of what's happening in our disability support departments, I mentioned that huge rise in numbers. We also track staff to student ratios in those departments over time. So research shows that there's been a 44% rise in the number of students with disabilities per staff member over just the last 8 years alone. So it's a stark picture, I suppose, in a way, and I don't want to end this conference on a sour note. It's not what it's all about. But I just want to pose that question, that for all that's changed, so for all this increasing diversity, for all this increasing demand on our staff and our students, you know, have we done the fundamental work? I think the fact that we've built a lot of this movement from the ground up has meant that we've done a lot of work at the individual level. But really, have we tackled some of the really big stuff? I think we have a lot more to go in that process. So how much of our programs and our systems fundamentally changed in response? So I think it's a moment of pause and celebration, because we can celebrate what we've done, and we can be genuinely proud of the achievement of making Ireland's higher education population much more resemble what the wider diversity in our society is. But it means we have to kind of redouble our efforts now and say the next phase of this, which I think starts with all of the wonderful programs that we have operating in Path 4 and right across the nation. This is the beginning of the next phase of this, where we have to kind of ramp up and tackle the systemic stuff. So it's a reminder really that inclusion is not just about inviting everybody into the room, but it's about inviting them to redecorate it with us. I think we talked a lot about power today and power structures, and that's the next phase. It's about seeding power and actually saying it's easy to say I support inclusion, but it's not as easy to fundamentally change what you're doing in response. So the interesting thing about all this actually is that this is a vision from a strategic point of view that we've had at a national level for a long time. It's been recognising the need for this for quite a long time. This is the Hunt report on screen, which was launched by the Department of Education in 2011. This is the kind of bold strategic vision that I would be actually proposing right now today. It says the level of participation in higher education that Ireland now requires is unprecedented, and it requires us to engage in a fundamental re-examination of our programs, our pedagogy, our delivery channels, our support for students, and the entire funding and governance framework. This is coming from the Department of Education, right? They wouldn't be known necessarily as the most bold and ambitious body in the world, but they're recognizing from a societal point of view and an economic point of view, this is what needs to happen. This is back in 2011. I think what we've done is we've done huge work in opening that door, but I still think we need some fundamental redecoration. The Hunt report actually specifically calls out the increasing diversity of our students, and it's saying that will have to be matched by teaching and assessment methods that will enable students from this broad range of backgrounds to discover, to exploit, and to build on their strengths. So again, this is a big, strong, bold vision that I think we haven't quite yet realised, and it's something that I think should be guiding us as a principle for the next number of years as we head towards trying to reach that target for 2020 or 2030. Interestingly, our quality body recognises some of these pressures that we've talked about. We've talked about over-assessment. This is QQI, a report from 2021, and an insight on assessment that they produced as part of a national forum project. They're saying that over-assessment is a major problem out of the research that they've done, which impacts on students and staff workloads. So despite all of these rising pressures, we're creating problems for ourselves by over-assessing our students. In other words, our academics are creating work for themselves and creating work for their students that's actually going above and beyond testing the learning outcomes at question. That's why I would always like to bring the principle in of, in GDPR we have this principle of data limitation. Only collect what you need, only assess what you need. Assessment limitation is really important. They specifically identified the problematic area of bunching of assessment, and even for students that manage their time really, really well, QQI's research is pointing that this can still result in peak assessment loads being unsustainable. So we can imagine for our students who have all sorts of different demands and maybe aren't able to manage their time very well, that's going to cause even more challenges for them. QQI is also, like the Hunt report, recognising that we need imaginative and forward-looking approaches to assessment to keep up with the number and diversity of our students and the evolving expectations. And they've particularly called out giving choice, which I think is interesting. So this is our quality body saying, in response to all of these changes, this is what we need to be doing. We need to be forward and bold. And interestingly, they've picked out the locus of the exam as a really, really sort of point of engagement for this, or point of scrutiny. They're saying the preponderance of the end of semester 2 or 3 hour written examination is under the magnifying glass now. So that's really interesting, because it's from a quality point of view, right? So our quality body is telling us that to look at academic integrity, to serve our students with quality, these are things that we need to do. That's really important from an examination point of view for our disadvantaged cohorts. I know lots of us in the room talk about exams, right? In the access and inclusion space, we talk about it, that it's sort of an elephant in the room that's been there for a long time. And the research is very clear on the disadvantage in nature. It's not something just that we feel. So for example, Smith found in 2011 that examinations particularly disadvantage English as second language cohorts in terms of the grades. So the grades they receive are worse in exam heavy subjects than those in other assessment modes. We know that diverse students who took focus groups with TIE also felt that exams weren't necessarily relevant to the learning outcomes that they had, and they specifically picked out that they weren't relevant to what how performance might be measured out in the real world. They saw that disconnect and they felt it, and that's something that's actually found in the wider student base in the evidence too. It's not just our diverse learners. Okay, I think there's some slides a little bit missing, but we'll go. We'll run with it. So basically, to sort of get around to the end, I'll just recap on a few more major findings. One, from an ahead perspective, is that 85% of our students with disabilities who are registered with services receive one or more exam accommodation. 85%. When we saw those staggering numbers of students with disabilities coming through, are we really prepared to say that the problem is our students with disabilities when such a high number require us to put a ladder to get over this barrier? Are we really continuing to look ourselves in the eye and say that? And interestingly, when we look at our accommodations, there's a lot of research, particularly in the exam accommodation zone, that those accommodations actually don't address equity of access in terms of the outcomes, that often they're very prescriptive in nature. So there's actually a lot of evidence to say that those exam accommodations in the first place are a little bit of a futile efforts too. So we're actually trying to include our students, and we're doing our best in the situation. So the other thing to say is that from the research from ahead, we have really clear qualitative data about this that's taken from COVID. There's a lot of anger amongst our students with disabilities because they were given so much during COVID, and now it's being taken away. We had one particular student, I remember, who was saying specifically that in their criminology and their psychology exams that they took, they were basically scraping passes or indeed failing some of their subjects pre-COVID. They came into COVID and they ended up having open book exams, which are still timed exams, but timed over a longer period, and open book and alternative assessments. And they went from scraping and passing fails to the top 5 to 10 in their year in a 1 year turnaround. Same student, 1 year, only difference is our assessment instrument. So this is a very flawed instrument, and we talk a lot about academic integrity, and often that's really placed at the students' feet in terms of making sure our students are being ethical in how they do their work. But for me, this is a real point where we actually need to accept and have a look at our own ethics in this and say, you know, are we engaging in a form of sort of institutional cheating when we look at those things? So that's a big bone of contention. And yeah, National Forum research on actually the sort of propensity of the exam to be out there tells us that pretty much across every discipline in higher education, this is from a study Geraldine O'Neill did with 30 different undergraduate programs, which looked at all of the modules in those programs over the full life cycle. And the exam is pretty much dominant in every single field as the major assessment instrument. So it kind of begs the question for me, are we making our decisions about assessment design, about quality, about rigor, are we making them in a world that doesn't actually exist anymore, you know? The world has completely changed, and yet we're still trying to hang on to some of our kind of artifacts that are just clinging on, sort of like the Terminator at the back of the car. And so for me, this is the point where we need to come together. You know, we have such an amazing community that's working on this. Everybody in the room and lots of people who also couldn't make it today have built up a real momentum, a real energy. The Path 4 projects have also kind of revitalise that momentum. But I think it's time we started taking some big scalps. That's my message for you coming out of here. It's time to take the big old scalps. I don't think we can mess around with our individual practice. That's all brilliant stuff, and we need to see that continue. But now as a collective, we need to start looking at the big ticket items. So in all that, I suppose looking at assessment, what can we do? Okay, remember that one of the big things that we need to do is we need to reduce the load for our staff and our students. So some of the things we can do maybe in the shorter term, well, first of all, we can look at definitely much more programmatic approaches to our assessment. You know, there's too much work happening in silos. We need to come together within our programs to make sure that, okay, where are there opportunities across 3 modules to have one assessment? This is going to save time for our academics in terms of marking load. It's going to save time for our students and make life more manageable for them. So again, making those kinds of decisions with our understanding of the reality of what faces both staff and students. I think involving students in the process is really important in this. That's been highlighted throughout. Students are our biggest source of information about quality out there. So we need to be in touch with them all the time and engaging them in the process. I'd be a big fan of actually not grading our students at all in the first year of our colleges, and making sure that we're building a lot of peer feedback, a lot of assessment for learning as part of the work, and making sure that we're actually scaffolding that so when they come to the point of our higher stakes work that they're ready for it. You know, I think there's a lot of tired faces, so I'm not going to bang on too much longer. Thanks so much for taking a listen. I was going to do another Slido thing, but you know what? It's hot outside. We all want to go for a pint. Does anybody really want to do Slido with me? You know what I might do is, if you want to stick it on your phone, open it up. I'll leave it open, and I'd love to share the results with you, because the next question is, what's the scalps? Where do we see the big ticket scalps? Where are the things that we all know in our hearts are wrong, and they're not treating our students justly, and they're not meeting the diversity that we have, and we all know them. There's probably 5, 6, 7 things in every institution that's a big old dog hanging over you every day you go into work, and you just don't feel right about it, but we kind of feel like we can't do it. We do what James said earlier, the twatty, was that what it was called? Twatty? Twatta? Twatty. We twatty. So maybe Danielle, you can open that Slido. So I'm going to leave it with you rather than ask you to hang around and sort of wallow in the mire of this beautiful building, but we're all ready to get out there and enjoy the sunshine. So thanks so much for listening, everybody. If there's any questions, I'd love to hear from you, and get in touch. Hopefully we can reassemble the slide deck when it goes out, and there'll be my contact details will be on the end of that. So